A couple who earns $300,000 in Vancouver are drowning. So we're going to get into this and just what's really happening in the Canadian debt bubble that you need to know right now. So I'm drowning, couple earning $300,000 a year, struggling to live in Vancouver. Now you have to go and look at the rent in Vancouver as well to see where things are at with the rental market. And even though they own their home, it's just insane. The rent in Vancouver, they've actually gone down. They've gone down 10% in the last year, which is a substantial drop. But at one point, they were at 3,200. Right now, they're around 2,900. So they've had a nice drop and they're continuing to drop, obviously. But the problem is these rents are extremely high and these rents are more than people can afford. And homeowner costs, again, they haven't gone down. They've gone and skyrocketed, and essentially even people on high incomes are just really struggling. But I want you to pick up the cues here, because it's really obvious that in a lot of cases you have people who earn high amounts of money, but all that happens is as their income increases, guess what? So do their expenses. So they're never actually having more, saving more, investing more, doing things like that. And if they are investing, it's usually just into the Canadian housing bubble, and that all obviously presents a problem moving forward, which we'll get into in this video. So it's a challenging time in Vancouver as many residents express their stresses due to the high cost of living. Despite a household income of $300,000, one man says he is drowning. A podcast series about finances called The Ramsey Show shared a call it recently received from Vancouver resident Payman. "I really need help from you guys," he said, adding his family is spending more than they earn. According to Payman, he is taking home $8,500 a month. His wife is earning $4,000 a month, but is currently on maternity leave and does not plan to return to work for a few more months. He said she is currently earning around $1,600 a month from EI. Payman also broke down his monthly expenses on the podcast to give co-hosts a better idea of what he is up against. And this is where it gets really interesting. Talk about living beyond your means. Even people on the higher income brackets, in fact most people do this on the higher income brackets, it's universal pretty much across the board. It's pretty much normal, this keeping up with the Joneses mentality. To drive an old car and do things like that just is seen like, oh, you're poor, you drive a 10-15-year-old car. But actually, when you look at the people who do that, usually they're investing and saving the most money because they don't have these unbelievable expenses. He explained that he bought a 20-year-old suburban home for $1.4 million 2 years ago. Initially, monthly payments for the house were $5,400, but increased to $7,200. Obviously, interest rate increases there. The couple rents 2 bedrooms in their home and earns $2,000 from tenants. And you could argue that with rents going down, where's that heading? Probably not up. So fixed monthly costs include $420 for property taxes. That's just insane. $50 for leasing instruments, $150 for a gym membership, $2,000 for groceries, $350 for utility bills. Wow, they're definitely not in Alberta. $1,000 in car loans, but you know, you've got the average monthly payment now for a car loan above $1,000, or it was, so that's really to be expected. $250 in city costs and $530 for insurance for his house and 2 cars. Insurance incredibly expensive across Canada. Monthly expenses total just under $12,000. With all their combined earnings while his wife is on maternity leave, they bring in just over $12,000 a month. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously he purchased this vehicle, he bought it for $75,000 for this tax refund, but basically that didn't work out and he threw that money away because he's essentially got expenses that are higher than what he's bringing in. And it's just caused to the downfall of the get rich quick mindset, which doesn't really work. There is no get rich quick scheme without hard work. That's what people do not understand. Again, there's just this herd mentality, and I think because of the Amazon age and people just being able to order things and they turn up instantly, that they think, oh, I can just do that with my income. But obviously it It doesn't work like that. And if you do get that, then it's not going to last. That's for certain in most cases. So it's very interesting. And obviously they're even renting out that as well. But it's not just him that is having this problem. When you go and look at what renters are doing, it's even worse. I mean, credit card debt is growing among Canadian renters. What are the solutions? Well, obviously high rental prices are not helping there. But do people not see that this is really a problem, and this is going to cause a problem for the banks, obviously, that have all that debt as assets on their balance sheet, the Canadian banks, because it's not likely going to be paid back. So for many Canadians, a common financial rule that your rent should not take up more than 30% of your total monthly income has become an impossible guideline to follow. And again, you know, they don't qualify people based on a set of guidelines, really, especially if it's the landlord who's handling the process completely. So if they put a place up for $4,000 a month, somebody says they'll take it and it's 50% of their monthly expenses, they're probably not going to be too bothered or suspicious about that. I did some math here. 30% of my pay is $966. A renter in Toronto said, but in reality, she says her monthly rent is over $3,200. Smith used her line of credit to cover the costs of her rental house and says she's often had to prioritize paying rent and feeding her children over paying off her credit card debt. So there you go. Just another sign, and we're seeing those rising delinquencies, obviously. It's a scary situation to be in, but I'd rather miss a couple of payments and damage my credit than not have a house or feed my kids, said Smith. You're getting to this breaking point now, essentially, where nothing is working, where everything is too expensive. Both the people who own homes, their back are up against a wall because they've got the high cost of home ownership, coupled with, if they have investment properties, your renter might be putting it on a credit card or line of credit. Obviously, there's no longevity there. That is going to come to head at some point, and they're not going to pay that, and they're not going to pay you, and the risk is just skyrocketing for people who own investment property in Canada, which is so many people, and so many of those people own multiple properties as well, because the banks have allowed this to happen. In fact, they've enjoyed it. They've liked it. If you have one property, that's great. You're even more likely to get a second. And if you have two, you're even more likely to get a third. And that's the way it's worked and the way they've stacked the dominoes. But if you watch this channel, you'll know that it's not going to be good when the dominoes fall. So obviously, credit market debt to disposable income, extremely high, although it has come down. But if you actually look at the consumer credit, it's just gone straight up, guys. There's been no stop in the taking on of credit for consumers. So obviously, that is not a good sign at all. It's the weakening economy that is bringing down the other numbers. And when you look at consumer spending, pretty much since 2022, it hasn't really done a lot. Consumer spending not really doing a lot. So that's not good for the economy. It's really just growing with inflation. Again, that's not really good when you look and have an economic outlook. So when you look at debt to GDP as well, and I've pointed this out many of times, when you look at Canada, they've peaked out here. If you go to the United States, back in 2007, 2008, that's when they were peaking out in the United States. They were peaking out before all the problems with the banks. That's what people don't realize. And you've got the same thing that is happening in Canada right now. And as you can see on this chart, you really have not seen a peak like this in this chart. This is clearly where you've got a peak. And obviously the United States, you know what happened there. It was not good for them at all. And Japan, even the Japanese credit bubble, it was not as large as the Canadian one. And obviously we know we're already in a lost decade in Canada, because you've seen GDP per capita essentially erasing over a decade's worth of growth because of the high immigration, obviously pulling the prosperity down per person, because guess what? There's not enough to go around. So if you're increasing your population and there's just no prosperity that is there, there's just just no jobs, there's just no growth there, then guess what's going to happen? You're going to see that shrink. You're going to see everybody's standard of living drop. And that's what people don't realize until it finally hits home for them. And they've just seen this kind of go down and just stagnate up and down a little bit. But they've had interest rates, guys, at zero, even negative at some point for a long time. And guess what? It has not done anything. That's the thing. People think interest rates come down, everything's going to boom. Even the Bank of Canada talks about how interest rates coming down now, they're starting to see some effects of that. And it's just completely stupid. The only effects of that they're seeing is the psychological ones, because it has absolutely no impact in reality, because most people have locked in terms for their debt, and also most people have increased their debt so much over the past 3 years that it really does not make a hell of a lot of a difference in their payments either. So it's interesting what's happening. Obviously, consumer credit continues to grow. We'll have to continue to monitor this. And Hilliard, who I interviewed the other week, was saying, you know, you need to watch that mortgage debt. When that mortgage debt stagnates, which it is right now, but when it starts to stop growing and starts coming down, that's really where you know you're in the gnarly part of this cycle. And we're not even there yet, but we are at the point where it's starting to stagnate. But on the other hand, consumer credit for everything else, credit card, auto loans, all those different things just continues to go up, because guess what? People are just using their credit card to pay their rent, and then they're not paying the credit card company. So obviously this isn't going to end well, is it? So anyway, if you've enjoyed this live stream, I'd highly recommend to check out this one right here. And if you're looking for a VPN and want to help out this channel at the same time, go to expressvpn.com/marketmania and use the affiliate link in the description of this video. I will see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Have a good one.